Hello, I'm Anthony. Over the process of the past year or so, I've been putting together this album. I've made a few videos about it. The album's called The River. It's my first album. It's finished. I'm just in the process of polishing off the final touches on the mastering. I'm doing the whole process myself, so having to learn a lot. I've never, produced an album before, so just getting to the stage where it's actually sonically consistent has been a challenge. But I'm pretty much there now, so I want to talk about some of the stuff that I've learned over the course of this process. Now, the first thing that I think is really important to say, and I dealt with this in a video I made a short while ago, is the length of the album. It's about 43 minutes long, and that's really deliberate. I actually made a list of all of my favourite albums and determined just by looking at the length of them all that I prefer an album to be anywhere between like 41 to 43 minutes. There's an absolute sweet spot, and all of my very favourite albums sit inside it. And that completely makes sense. Because if you think about it from each of the extremes on either side, when LPs were superseded by CDs and that average in the low 40s went up to the low 70s, which was the maximum storage capacity of a CD, many artists considered that license to make albums that long, and it was just a simple, okay, well, we've got more room to play with now, we can do more stuff. I don't think the quality of albums went up when that happened. In fact, I think it went down. I think people got lazy, and there's lots of songs on those 55 plus minute albums that wouldn't have made it onto the LP, and the LP would have been better. The vinyl LP would have been better than the finished version that we actually get. So I think it's really important to guard against laziness, and I made the same mistake myself. When I first started to lay out the songs for this album, I actually started at the time, basically just went into the folder of songs that I'd written in the past 3 years. Each one of these songs has been a project that I've completed on this channel. So you can watch Back on Track series for each one of these pieces of music, except Sunset. That's unfinished. But everything up to River Song is a fully finished song. So I went into this folder and said, which songs do I want to be on my album? Which songs feel like they fit together, they're telling a consistent story. Most of my songs are autobiographical. Some very explicitly aren't, but most of them are. And so when I called that list together, it came to about 55 minutes, and I thought, okay, that's about right for a length of an album, isn't it? It's only subsequently I've discovered it would have been way too long. And the number of times in the past few weeks as I've been completing this album, you have to listen to the entire thing from start to finish. I think that's critically important, something I want to talk about today. But after about 42 minutes, I'm done. I've had enough. I don't want to listen to any more. I want to take my earbuds out and go and do something else. So I'm really, really pleased that I identified that it was important for me not to overindulge in the way that I think many other musicians do. So here we are. Let's talk about the arrangement of these songs. The only way that you can figure out how one song fits into another, fits next to another, is empirically. Now, I started off, the very first thing that I did was go through each of these songs and figure out what key they were in. Some keys modulate, but we're only really interested in the beginning and end of the song. And so here we are. Here are the keys of each of the songs, and you'll see a couple of moments where it actually matters. River Song, Into the Dream, they're both in E minor, and Undertow into Springtime, they're both in C major. In the case of Undertow into Springtime, I explicitly made use of that, and those two songs are completely merged so that one bleeds seamlessly into the other. Let's hear that. So having decided that I was going to do that crossfade, I went back in and re-recorded the end of the bass line for Undertow in order to hold that bass note long enough for Springtime to fade in underneath. So that's an example of the album design explicitly informing the songwriting process. I went in and edited the song because I knew that this was going to happen. So that was particularly useful in that case, and I'm glad that I actually did that kind of key analysis. Some of the other key analyses that I've done haven't been quite so obvious, quite so explicit, but they're still there. An example of a slightly more abstract key change is in between these two songs, From Springtime into Insomnia. You can see that I've put this interlude. Now, this was something that I explicitly decided I wanted. in my album. The majority of the songs in this album are connected with these intervening moments of music. And most of the notes played in these are all keyboard lines. They're all instances of Omnisphere, actually. And I've left them in this album project. This project is the actual thing that renders the final WAV file. And in the case of these Omnisphere instances, you can see that I've left the original MIDI notes in. I haven't rendered them to audio because there was absolutely no need to. The CPU burden in this project is pretty low, and it just gives me that extra flexibility to do some editing. So this has been really useful to have the overall project at the top. I'll talk about the audio tracks in a moment, but I just want to finish off this point about the key changes, because from Springtime into Insomnia, the notes in these keyboard parts actually track them. So we go from C to G, transition through an E, but basically the notes behind, and they're very abstract, they're effectively atmospheric sounds, but because they have that little bit of tonal colour to them, it actually helps. So I'll play you one of these interludes, give you the idea of the kind of thing that's going on. So all of the notes at the moment, this atmosphere is in C. Can't really tell. It's almost subliminal. And then all of the notes shift down to G, and then fade away. And as that kind of essence of G disappears, your ear is kind of, your palate's cleansed, ready for the beginning of Insomnia, which is in G. So a lot of thought's gone into these transitions to try to meld these songs together in the best possible way. Part of the reason why I came up with these transitions, beyond absolutely loving the idea, albums that have transitions in, I just absolutely adore. My favourite example is Wildwood by Paul Weller. There are a couple of instrumental interludes in that album that just take it to the absolute next level. It's just fabulous stuff. But many others, I really like the idea. And having spent quite some time deciding whether or not, if I really went for it and put interludes in between all of the songs, it was going to be too much. That was part of the empirical process that I've gone through over the past few weeks, listening to this thing over and over again, trying to decide whether or not they were enhancing the overall effect or diminishing it. And as you can see, there are so many here. I've very much come to the conclusion that I like the idea, and I'm very happy and comfortable with it. But one of the other reasons was that there weren't many cases where the songs really fit absolutely perfectly together. In fact, Undertone Springtime is the only example where a direct connection really worked and I was really happy with it. In the rest of the cases, it proved to be better to separate the songs and put something in between that acted as a bridge, and all of these interludes are doing exactly that job. They are also telling an artistic story, and I'm in danger of kind of veering into pomposity here. I'll try not to, because I'm a very pragmatic person. I like to kind of observe something and say, is that better than the other thing? But I do have this overall kind of sense of understanding of what this album is supposed to be, and the various interludes, these directional changes that these pieces of music take, actually mean something to me thematically. That little interlude that I just played there, you heard a song just fade in and fade out again very, very gently in the background. What you heard there was Snowfall, which is this song over here. So I've extracted a moment out of that song and just included it in the transition, just to give it like an extra little bit of like melodic colour to the thing. All of these decisions have been deliberate and an active part of the creative process, if you like. Now, having said that songs might not fit together absolutely perfectly, nevertheless, it was really important to have an overall sense of flow for the album, and this was something else that took me quite a long time to figure out how to do it. You basically have to listen to the end of each song. I would listen to maybe the last 15 seconds of each song. Let's say River Song. So you choose the last 15 seconds of that song, and then you listen to the first 15 seconds of every other song. So that's 9 instances of 30 seconds over the course of 15 minutes or so. You're going to listen to every single combination of River Song plus X. And I would write down which ones worked and which ones didn't. Over the course of a morning, you can cover all 10 songs. There's 10 songs on this album, and it didn't take me very long to start with each one as the object, and then each of the other 9 songs would be the successor. Well, do that 10 times and you've basically got this grid of acceptable blocks. And some songs are kind of universal joints. Shades of Blue, for instance, turned out to be perfectly happy sat after any other piece of music. The way that it starts just lends itself to that kind of, it's a very sparse, just the drums on its own with no melodic content, so there was nothing kind of polluting the air from a tonal perspective. Turns out that Shades of Blue will sit next to any other song, whereas others, Undertow for instance, didn't fit well with any song. There was nothing that came before it that really sounded good. And the reason is because it's got a completely naked acoustic guitar introduction that none of the other songs fit particularly well. And you can see in this particular case, the way that I've done it is with a very long interlude. This is the longest in the album, and I really got soundscapey. I had such a good time doing this. I basically kind of, I don't know, embraced my inner Brian Eno, and I really did kind of push that soundscape envelope to the point where the previous song is gone. It's completely thrown away. And we're just left with this kind of noise landscape into which fades Undertow. So I'll play a little bit of this. There is also a fade in this G-sharp Phrygian thing. It is another musical interlude that I bring back in and take out again. Let's hear all this. So again, at the moment, I'm just cleaning the boards. I'm getting rid of the last song.
Down at the undertow.
And then by the time the song starts, you've had that sense of space and kind of solitude with all of these sound effects noises. I've had such a whale of a time, absolutely joyous doing all of this soundscaping stuff. Really, really enjoyed it. And it's an important, like, crucial part of the album. I'll just kind of show you one other example while we're listening to this one. Wind and water noises have been an important kind of thematic element in this album. I'm not going to go into the whole underlying concept of what the river is, and it's not a concept album. It's really important for me to say. Didn't want to write a concept album, but I do want all of these pieces of music linked together. And so I have water noises. I'm doing this stuff. Not only was awesome fun, I had such a good time finding the spaciest, kind of widest sounding sound effects, but it really does kind of help to tie all of this stuff together. And lots of these sounds, as you can see, are repeated multiple times throughout the album. Really gives it a sense of cohesion. In terms of the layout of the structure itself, the project, the Cubase project, at the top obviously I've got the songs themselves. For the majority of construction, these two audio tracks were simply called Audio 1, Audio 2, and I would use them as dual lanes so that I could basically put two songs together on separate tracks, have different volume fades between them. You can see the majority of the fading I've done with volume automation. There are only a couple of crossfades in the song itself because you've simply got more flexibility with volume automation. There's no real need to use a crossfade. It's simply volume down on one track and volume up on the other. There's nothing magical about it. So I decided for the most part to use volume automation and simply moved the audio events from part to part, from track to track, very carefully selecting how long these gaps wanted to be, even in between the fade outs and the new song coming in. All of this is just, it's so difficult and so fine-tune dependent. I really didn't appreciate the gaps in between albums being super important, but but now I do. Now I realise that that's all part of the flow. So then we've got our Omnisphere tracks, that's the dark green stuff. Down at the bottom, we've just got audio samples. So these are samples that have been dragged in from Media Bay, predominantly water sounds. In fact, I think exclusively water sounds. There's one tiny little explosion sound there. But for the most part, I've got audio at the bottom, and they're really treated synonymously. There's no difference between the Omnisphere tracks that are playing live, but that's simply because there was no reason at all to need to render. The project CPU burden is absolutely fine, so I just had that extra flexibility while I was doing the thing. In terms of overall pacing, getting the high energy tracks and the low energy tracks to work together has also been a real challenge. There are 3 quite low energy tracks on this album. River Run, Undertow and Springtime are all very gentle, very subdued, and at one point all 3 of them were together, and the idea was that I wanted a part of the album which was kind of a repose, you know, a moment of quiet contemplation. The problem was, after having convinced myself for a couple of weeks that that was the way to go, I changed my mind. It was too much. There was too much intensity in the early part of the album where all these high energy tracks lived together, that it was just too much. It was becoming incessant, and I felt like I needed that moment of quiet in between some of the more high energy stuff. Now, The Dream is really in your face. It's a very violent song, very abrasive song, and Evermore is probably the second most. If you rank the songs in terms of kind of aggression, then Dream is number 1 and Evermore at 2. And in between, we've very deliberately got a couple of gentle songs. River Run is an out-and-out acoustic piece.
Seasons fall upon the floor.
And Snowfall is a gentle and light love song. So to have these 2 really aggressive songs on either side of that contrast worked pretty well. So working out how this pacing is supposed to be, you've got an energy level and a kind of, I don't know, anger to happy level. The overall sense of emotion as opposed to energy is a different kind of thing. See, Snowfall's a gentle love song, but it's quite high energy, it's quite brisk. Whereas River Run is very slow and very quiet. So those 2 things fit really well together. Now, working out this stuff, you can try that 15 seconds at the end, 15 seconds at the beginning thing, and that's going to tell you whether or not actual transitions work from one song into another, but it's not going to tell you if those 2 songs work together as a whole in the context of a bigger thing. The only way that you're going to do that is listen to the whole damn thing. I can't stress this enough. I must have listened to this album 30 times in the past month. It's only once a day, but that's a lot. That's a lot to listen to 42 minutes worth of music. And so at least once a day, I've put the whole thing on. I'll put my buds in. I'll go and lie down on the couch and just basically close my eyes and really concentrate, really listen to the album as a thing and feel if anything felt out of place. And up until a couple of weeks ago, the answer was always yes. This settled track listing only finally arrived a couple of weeks ago, and that was because of this entire holistic perspective. Listen to the whole thing. Now, most of that time I didn't make notes. I just closed my eyes and just listened to the music and tried to be part of the artistic experience. But sometimes I did. Sometimes I would sit down with a piece of paper and actually write notes about guitar solo too harsh, bass too woofy, you know, all sorts of different kind of observations of the overall thing. This song doesn't work into this song. Album energy is lagging around, you know, in between these 2. So each time round, I'd make these notes, go back in, fix them, give it a day, not listen to it again immediately. And then on the following day's session, come back, try again. And only when I got to the stage where I had a smile on my face for 43 minutes did I realise that I was actually getting pretty close. I'm not going to talk in depth about the final mastering process today. That's a subject for a different day. Today I really wanted to focus on the layout of the album as an entire piece and how important it is to listen to the entire thing. You can't skimp. You can't just jump to the middle of a song and kind of get there, because you're going to lose that flow. You're going to lose that sense of continuity. Anyway, it shouldn't be more than a week or so before this thing comes out. Hope you enjoy it when it does, and hope you enjoyed this video. Please hit like if you did. I'll see you again shortly. Thanks very much.